They say a feast can be a trap. Imagine a long wooden table set beneath a winter sky, torches guttering, the air between men full of wine and calculation. At the edge of the clearing, stakes pierced the snow like a forest of accusations. What was served that night was not only meat and bread, but a message driven into flesh, fear, dominion, an anatomy of warning meant to be read aloud by birds and wind. Whether the stories of wedding gifts wrapped around human horror are strict fact or the fevered embroidery of rumor, the image has lodged itself in the world's imagination. A widow's curse whispered into the ears of nobles who thought themselves safe. This is a tale that must be handled with both the precision of a historian and the care of a human voice. Names will be given where records allow. Where memory frays and the archive goes quiet, I will mark legend and historian's inference. If you come for spectacle, leave your appetite at the door. If you come for a slow, cinematic excavation of power, mortality, and the small heartbreaks that survive brutality, like and subscribe. Stay with me as we walk from banquet hall to gallows, from rumor to the cold ledger of history.
Banquets and Blades, the performance of power. In this video, we will sit at the edge of ceremony and violence, where feasting and the demonstration of authority meet and collide. The scene is a hall of oak and tapestry, torches sweating wax, bowls steaming with meat, spiced for show. Courtiers laugh, trumpets nasally insist on joy. And yet beneath the laughter, there is a choreography of threat, a prince's glanced signal, an aide's clipped step, a ledger kept by candlelight of debts both material and mortal. Here we will trace the culture of gift and obligation in 15th century Wallachia and Transylvania, where alliances were sealed with bread and bound with blood-spattered etiquette. Sensory detail will be immediate: the salt on skin, the sour of spilled wine, the squeak of a wooden chair dragged back too slowly, because power always moves through the body. We will not claim that every feast ended in atrocity. We will instead examine how ritual dining could be weaponized, how hospitality became a stage where humiliation and instruction were administered. Historians debate particular incidents. Where they do, I will label them as contested and present the mosaic of testimony: diplomatic letters, merchant recollections, and later chronicles that mix fact with vengeance. This chapter will leave the reader with the sense that ceremony and cruelty often share a table, and that the gestures of courtesy can be repurposed into implements of terror.
The widow's curse and the making of legend. Here we slow, collecting the whispers that grew into legend. A widow, it is said, wrapped a poisoned token or cursed a dowry. Blood became an oath. This chapter is less courtroom than oral archive, an attempt to parse how stories of vengeance, of brides giving gifts that were graves, formed around real campaigns of reprisal. We will follow the pathways of rumor, from a frightened village to a traitor's ledger, from a priest's confession to a foreign envoy's dispatch. Each retelling alters the contours of what might have happened and what people needed to believe. Why did certain stories gain traction? Because they served political ends, because they comforted the fearful, because they explained the inexplicable in a world without newspapers but full of rumor. Sensory language will anchor the metaphors in lived detail: the linen clinging to a widow's hand, the hush that falls when a family refuses bread at a funeral, the metallic taste in a mouth when a new tale begins. We will interrogate the psychology of legend and how myth both conceals and reveals cruelty, how a curse can be a language for grief and accusation. Where sources exist to corroborate, they will be cited as testimony or record. Where nothing remains but story, that absence will be named and respected. This chapter asks whether the legend is a distortion of events or a necessary frame through which people made sense of suffering.
The ledger of bones, justice, retribution, and the personal cost.
Moving from rumor into the smaller, sleepless world of individuals, this chapter examines what punishment meant on the ground. Impalement, exile, confiscation of lands. These were not theatrical props but lived experiences that reshaped families, economies, and alliances. We will follow specific figures when records allow. Nobles whose estates dwindled under fines. Women who negotiated survival in the shadow of a fallen husband's name. Soldiers tasked with carrying out the commands that toppled reputations and bodies alike. The narration will remain humane. It will render the quiet ledger entries as the slow tally of grief. Sensory detail will be bleak and intimate. The sting of salt on a wound, the scrape of a cartwheel over frozen earth, the low moan of a household that has lost its patriarch. We will also examine legal culture, how law and custom permitted or resisted acts of vengeance, how the voivode's authority functioned in practice, and how local courts and itinerant judges mediated claims. Where the historical record is sparse, the prose will acknowledge the limit and weave plausible texture only as historians might, never as assertion. This chapter will ask, who pays for the spectacle of power when the pageant ends? The widows, the orphans, the peasants whose fields are plundered in the name of politics. Outside the court, diplomacy, trade, and the echo of atrocity. Widening the frame, we will trace how tales of blood traveled beyond the castle walls and shaped relations with neighbors. Merchants adjusted routes when a lord grew feared. Envoys wrote urgency into dispatches. Foreign courts parsed whether such brutality was an internal matter or a risk to alliances. Here we will explore the geopolitical repercussions, how a voivode's reputation for cruelty affected trade with Transylvanian Saxons, how the Ottoman and Hungarian powers read acts of terror as signals in a broader game of control, and how exile and asylum functioned in this fraught borderland. Sensory detail changes from the intimate to the public. The smell of leather on merchant wagons, the murmur of markets that tally rumor into prices, the formal scratch of a scribe translating a report. This chapter will also ask how external powers used stories of violence for leverage, and conversely, how local actors weaponized reputation to secure safety or revenge. The narrative will balance the macro and the micro, showing how a single act could ripple into trade embargoes, military responses, or a tightening of matrimonial alliances. Where cause and effect are uncertain, the account will give historians competing readings, allowing the reader to see how political calculus and human suffering are braided together.